The built environment means that the urban structure is designed and built just as any other type. So in the early days, because of the rise of the industrial society, the emergence of technological change, the mass influx of population grew.
Sometimes see me as a sharp-edged stone. I was still born from mountain shed and fell below to be born by wind and sliced up by snow. Such a numb and lonely one. I'm gonna rise, I'm gonna fly, I'm gonna rise, I'm gonna fly. Ain't no hand that could hold me down. I'm home in the ground. Ooh, I'm gonna rise, I'm gonna fly, I'm gonna rise, I'm gonna fly. Ain't no road that could keep me by. Ain't no hand who could hold me down. Ain't no hand, ain't no hand. Sometimes seems like I'm a cloud-bound town, built a man-made steel and a human power brace to carry on, stand for years by hours, but can never own the sky. I'm gonna rise.
Just kind of say, like, tell us what partnerships and public is all about.
I'm gonna rise.
And then we can kick it in to say, and that relates to that's what brings you here is that we segregated that by this report from 2 years ago, or just that this is an ongoing how what do you think?
Ain't no road that could keep me by.
And they can hear my audio.
Ain't no hand.
Thoughts are going out live.
Who could hold me down? Ain't no hand, ain't no hand. Gonna rise up in the morning. Gonna rise up. Can't hold me down. Gonna rise up in the morning. Gonna rise up, can't hold me down. Gonna rise up in the morning. Gonna rise up, can't hold me down. No, gonna rise up in the morning. Gonna rise up, can't hold me down. What I feel at just comes and goes as summer fires and winter snows, but knowledge is as knowledge knows a deeper truth that goes and goes and goes, spins despite my will to play. My fear of something firm, but I can't hit its skin out, see it bleed on me, crack the fruit and plant the seed of hope and hope. Hope will grow wings, 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 hope will grow wings. I'm gonna rise, gonna fly,
I'm gonna fly,
I'm gonna rise, gonna fly.
go fly.
Ain't no hand that could hold me down. My home ain't the ground. Ooh, I'm gonna rise, I'm gonna fly. Ooh, I'm gonna rise, I'm gonna fly. Ain't no hand that could hold me down. My home ain't the ground. I'm gonna fly. Ooh, I'm gonna rise, I'm gonna fly. Ain't no hand
Good evening, good neighbors. Welcome to another virtual slow roll presented by Independent Health. Seamus here from Slow Roll Buffalo. Wishing everyone well as we are still here in the middle of a pandemic and unable to have our big Monday massive free and inclusive community bike ride with everybody in person. We miss you all. We appreciate everyone tuning in here online as we continue to have our Monday night gathering in this way while we work on ways that we can restart our public group rides, and we will have more info to come on that as we continue to consult with public health officials on the if and the how. We appreciate, again, everyone who's able to join us here in the present, in the future, as we are streaming at slowrollbuffalo.org, as well as our YouTube channel and Facebook group. And we send a lot of love to everyone who is suffering in the middle of this pandemic now. We're in a better position here in Western New York than we were 2 months ago when we started our season online, but we know that a lot of people are still suffering from the virus itself and all of its effects. And so we hold space and send a lot of love and light and continue to encourage anyone who needs help or has help to offer to contact us, slowrollbuffalo@gmail.com, with any ideas on things that we can do to get involved. Our mission is to connect communities by bike, and while we're unable to have our public group rides, we're still connecting communities in a lot of ways. We're still on our bikes doing a lot of things, whether it's working with the Queen City Couriers, distributing food, and helping folks like over at the Push Buffalo Mutual Aid Hub is reopened now and calling for volunteers. And we would love to help connect anyone to the help that they need if they're looking, or a place where they can be of help. So keep in touch, please. Today's ride is something that we were working on over the winter, something that we wanted to talk about as the whole theme of a ride that we've talked about often during our rides and in the lead up to the ride with many of our community partners. The concept of redlining. Now, redlining has a long history, and when one of the reasons that the purposes of Slow Roll, that purpose of connecting community, when Slow Roll started in Detroit, here extended here in Buffalo, these are two of America's most segregated cities, two of America, and of course it's in Cleveland too. We have a guest tonight who has roots in Cleveland too. We have many guests tonight we're looking forward to bringing on, but these connections between the cities that brought out the existence of Slow Roll, cities that are segregated and that are suffering from poverty, some of the poorest and most segregated cities in America. And part of Slow Roll is connecting communities that have been disconnected, reconnecting communities in some way, and the people in them, and understanding how this came to be, why it persists. And one of the most prevalent reasons for that, going back nearly a century officially, is redlining. And so we're going to focus on that for this entire ride, and there are lots of offshoots to it that we will touch on with many guests, and we have a ride that we can begin now, thanks to our producer, Mark Odie, WNYmedia.net. We can get our ride footage going and welcome in our co-host for tonight, the director of the Partnership for the Public Good, Andrea O'Sullivan. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Seamus. And look at this. This is the entrance to our office at Partnership for the Public Good. I haven't seen that entrance too often in recent weeks, so it's good to see it there. And after that wonderful opening, I'm thinking about just leaving you and go getting on my bike now instead of doing this. Just kidding. But a beautiful video opener. So yes, Partnership for the Public Good. We're a 12-year-old community-based think tank here in Buffalo, Niagara. And what that means really is that we do research and policy advocacy work as a partnership. We're now a network of about 300 community groups and organizations, really all sizes, so many different issue areas. Many of folks that I know have joined Slow Roll rides in the past. We have everybody from block clubs to housing organizations, environmental justice groups, a big range in the partnership. And we really work to provide them with what we like to say is the research they need to turn their ideas into public policy.
Brilliant, thank you. And so we are rolling up northbound on Main Street from Partnership for the Public Goods office at 617 Main. So the theater district here, and we're kind of exiting with Shea's 710 Theater on the left. The Hostel Buffalo Niagara we just passed on the right, where we started our season last year. So this is Main and Tupper. And you'll see me pull some Idaho stops here as the coast is clear, which we don't have legally in Buffalo yet, but we will someday. We're here for it. So we're going to roll up Main Street, and basically, this route will show some of that divide, that intentional divide, the lines of segregation and disinvestment in Buffalo, and it really Main Street being the starkest line of that. So we're going to go from up here. We'll eventually get onto a little bit west of Main Street and a little bit east of Main Street, and we'll do that in multiple segments to show the difference and what is essentially the result of redlining. So we're here. This is Goodell, where people are going really fast because they just got off of the Kensington Expressway, and we'll discuss that a little bit tonight, as we often do. So with all of the issues, Andrea, that Partnership for the Public Good, PPG for short, touches on, this one, there's a great report from 2018, a brief history of segregation in Buffalo, and redlining has its own page on that. It's an important part of the history of our segregation in our city, correct?
That's right, absolutely. And as you said, Seamus, is this you filming, by the way, on your bike? But yeah. This is this video. You're really riding on the dividing line, as you said. And before we jump in and talk about what redlining is, what it was, what it is, it's important, I think, first to really say what we're talking about is where people live, right? Where do people live? And where a person, where a family lives really plays a huge role in every aspect of their life. Are they near quality jobs? Are their kids going to quality schools? Are they able to walk or even take a very short drive out their door and purchase fresh food? So much like that. The health outcomes, we'll talk more about this. But so we know if you live in an area that has access to all of this, you live in what's called an area of opportunity. And here in Buffalo, Niagara, just to get us started with some of the research that we have, over 60% of white people live in one of these above average opportunity areas where only 10% of Black people do. So, that really gets us started with, here we are continuing on Main Street on this dividing line. We also know that within Buffalo, 85% of all people, all Black people, live east of Main Street. All people who identify as Black live east of Main Street. And so this is really, as you're going to show us, where we can turn one way or the other and see the very different results of many decades of public policy choices.
And so we'll make that turn shortly here. So this is Main and High Street, the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus on the right, Allentown on the left, and further to the right, the Fruit Belt, where we'll just be on the edge of on the way back. And we've spent a lot of time, even on these virtual rides, just in the past few weeks, focused on the Fruit Belt. And so we'll make a left here at the next light, which is north. There's the Anchor Bar on the right. And when we make this left, this is where we'll get into the green and blue areas on this 1937 federal investment planning document. The green and blue being the good areas to invest in, the yellow and the red being the areas to not invest in, the red giving us the term redlining.
That's right. Yeah, so we can talk more about that, right? How do we get to this map, which is being pulled up here for us, City of Buffalo Neighborhood Conditions Map. I want to lift up too, one reason we really focus on redlining and segregation is not just to make us all feel bad about how divided we remain as a city and region, but it's to focus in on some of the most serious issues that we work on, right? So poverty is a really big one that I'm sure we're going to talk about as we watch and go along on this ride. We know that the poverty rate in the city of Buffalo is twice that, the region as a whole. And we know that of households living in extreme poverty, right, there's a much more higher percentage of people of color. Almost 2/3 of people of color in Buffalo, Niagara live in concentrated poverty compared to just 14% of white people. So how do we get here? Seamus is rightfully emphasizing redlining. And even before redlining, which I will go over in 1 minute, there were some other ways that folks, often northern homeowners, I'm saying northern because a lot of this policy started way back during the Great Migration. So as African Americans, as Black people moved up here to Buffalo, to Detroit, to the cities that had industry growing and job opportunities booming, there was a pushback, right? There was an initial racist reaction to that. Homeowners, with the help of lawmakers and other officials, really sought to segregate these new residents. And at first, this was done in a very overt way. We can look back and say that racism was very obvious because you had zoning laws that came right out and said, African Americans can't live in this neighborhood, can live in this neighborhood. Of course, that explicit type of racial zoning, racial policy was struck down by the Supreme Court, right? So then we have to move toward these more subtle ways of doing it. I think now we know and can talk about redlining as this overt, obvious policy, but it was actually a shift to be just a little bit more sneaky, a little bit more subtle about it. So after those, there's a whole range of tools. I want to emphasize a whole range of tools that got us to this place of segregated cities, segregated neighborhoods across the country. And redlining is a major one, but it is just one. So we can talk about some of the others as well. But as Seamus mentioned, the story of redlining was really one where the Federal Housing Agency, what so many of us now just simply call the FHA, set out to really underwrite low interest loans to increase home ownership in the wake of the Great Depression. And what ended up happening is they certainly increased home ownership for white people, but really undermined it for potential Black homeowners. So they would go through and draw maps and provide maps to banks saying, here's places, here's neighborhoods where we will back mortgages, where we will support lending to homeowners. And here's other neighborhoods that are high risk, and we're not interested in backing mortgages and investing in these places. And as Seamus has shared, you had green, blue, these were the neighborhoods, go ahead. Banks should do lending there, we should give out mortgages. And then you had the areas of red that were more risky. And a huge factor in what was a risky place to lend was quite simply race. And so you ended up in a situation where neighborhoods that had residents of color were seen as risky, do not lend there, and it really restricted the flow of lending and housing to those neighborhoods.
And this is a good example, again, of the green and blue section. And this is all written, it's documented, even just a simple search of Buffalo redlining. You'll find an interactive map of this 1937 planning document, a federal planning document, which refers to, when you mentioned the Great Migration, it refers to it as an infiltration. And that is the actual word that's used by the federal government. So this here, we're at Linwood and Ferry. Cyclists know this. Linwood as maybe the best street to bike in town. It has a contraflow two-way bike lane on a one-way street. Beautiful, big tree-lined, old, glorious houses. And that continues here as you turn onto Ferry, West Ferry. Many beautiful old homes and restored apartments here, like on the right. It will change when we cross over Main Street and we get in from the green and blue areas of investment to the yellow and the red. We're stopped here on the left, and I'll pull up for a second here. This is the Office of Housing Opportunities Made Equal that you wanted to emphasize here, right? This
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, Seamus. And I realized preparing for this ride how many of our wonderful partners at PPG actually have offices located all right up and down Main Street. and home or housing opportunities made equal is one of them. And this is a housing equity, housing fairness organization. And one thing that's important to reflect on, as I said, is all the subtle ways that discrimination can happen. So redlining, we can see the maps, we can see the intention of the government and the banks. There are other ways that this all continues today. So sometimes landlords might, for example, offer different terms to different people, prioritize tenants who look a certain way over others when a unit is available. I know we hear stories of a landlord will offer a white tenant a unit with half the security deposit that they offer a potential black tenant. So really making it easier for white tenants to access the space. And what's tough about this is you can't prove this housing discrimination very easily unless you have testers. And Home here in Buffalo has testers. So if you think that you are being discriminated against when you're looking to rent a place, if you think it's racial discrimination, you can call Home. And what they do is send out a white person and a black person to attempt to go through the process of renting a unit with that landlord and then document how their experience differs. That's just one piece of their work. They do a whole lot of other work, including landlord education to make sure that landlords are up to date on tenants' rights and issues like that. So it's a great organization that is really working to address the legacies of everything we're talking about today.
Excellent, thank you. And so crossing Main Street into the east side now, Skateland on East Ferry, and the Freedom Wall coming up. And one thing I noticed, I took a little look at that side street Otis there. So we're looking at streets, Michigan here, the Freedom Wall. We always, that was our focus of last week's virtual slow roll. And when you pass the Freedom Wall, you should make it a slow roll. And you can notice how slowly, how much slower I ride here to just breathe that in. We're so grateful for the presence of that. And I took another look here. I want to touch on a little bit. This is Performing Arts High School on the right. And I don't know how well it'll show up, but if you can see the artwork on the side, there is a football player with the number 48. You can barely see it, but that's Willie Evans, and the late, great Willie Evans, whose house on Jewett, we're going to ride past eventually here. And I'll point that out to Willie Evans also when it comes to segregation, his history of being one of two players on the 1958 UB football team that got invited to a Tangerine Bowl in Florida, but were told that the black players could not participate. So the team voted unanimously to reject the invitation. And Willie Evans wound up being signed by the Buffalo Bills in their expansion year, 1950, to be a phys ed teacher in the Buffalo schools for 30 years and made a great life for himself, including his boys, who we've gotten to know well. Neil and Alan Evans are still alive. I thought it would be nice to touch on Willie just here because we'll get to his house on Jewett, and he was able to make a wonderful life for himself that overcame this system here that from the neighborhood that here in Cold Springs, the opportunities that don't exist here as they do in Parkside. So you'll see just one thing that is stark to me is we talk about how beautiful Linwood is lined with trees, and how you look at these streets, Otis, Michigan, Maston, and just so much has been destroyed. And it's what your work, Andrew, with Partnership for the Public Good really documents how this happened. So we're turning left onto Jefferson and headed northbound on Jefferson Avenue, and one thing we were talking about earlier is about Jefferson is what a bustling commercial district it once was.
That's right. And actually, when Buffalo was first incorporated, this was the eastern boundary of the city. So we're really tracing the history. And then it's a great story that you mentioned about the early Bills player. And as we move up here, of course, we're going to go by the early Bills stadium at the corner of Maston Park as well. So to think, this was the edge of the city at one time, later was even where the Bills were playing. But yes, definitely big changes here Still some vibrant sites to visit, of course. The Challenger coming up on Jefferson shows really the importance of alternate media sources, Black media, Black-owned businesses. But definitely you see here a lot of the vacant lots. You know, a lot of these issues that we talk about at PPG, we like to emphasize some are challenges. You could also flip them and claim them as assets, right? And so we know we have over 8,000 vacant lots in the city of Buffalo. Many of them are here on the east side. And part of our partners' strategies to address this legacy of segregation and redlining and the lack of ownership afforded to the Black community is to make really community-controlled, community-led use of these vacant lots. And we can talk more about that.
Oh, and we'll stay on that. You know, we had our whole ride dedicated to the Community Land Trust in the Fruit Belt a few weeks ago, and just another one of the, you know, we're not here to just dwell on the problems. We'll talk about the solutions here, even in the course of this ride, and that's certainly one. So we're entering Hamlin Park here, Beverly on the right, beautiful street. Canisius College is now on the left, and the Hamlin Park neighborhood. Before we bring in our first guest from Canisius College, when it comes to this original investment map where the term redlining comes from, Hamlin Park is a really interesting case in this, right?
That's right, Seamus, and I'm really glad you brought that up. You know, when you go back to that map, and I'm not sure if Mark can pull that up for us now, but we have the 1937 redlining map, and you can see the kind of near east side of Buffalo, which was predominantly, yes, there it is at the time, Black people and more lower middle income was marked typical, the redlining at the time. You can see the little red square up above is Hamlin Park that we're talking about now. And this was an African-American community, but was relatively prosperous, and at different times had more diversity than other neighborhoods. But again, was simply placed in that D category, the risky red category, although it did have, you know, more prosperous Black folks living there at the time.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing that up, Mark. We can take it down for a second. So we're turning right onto Hughes Avenue. That's Canisius College on the right. I lived on this street when I was a student at Canisius College, and what a wonderful this neighborhood this is. Folks who've been involved with Slow Roll for years know how closely we've tied to this neighborhood and the Restore Our Community Coalition. We're going to take a little loop around this neighborhood that we can't really do with 1,000 people. So we're going to ride to the edge of the Kensington Expressway, and then kind of loop around the sides. And we'll show when we get there how some of the streets themselves were cut off, Loring and Oak Grove, and now they're part of what's known as the Trinidad neighborhood. And we'll ride to the other side on this route. We'll ride to the Trinidad neighborhood, which used to be part of Hamlin Park, but was severed from it by the Kensington Expressway, and left on its own, is now identified as Trinidad. But those street names are the same, so it's really a stark example of how this happened, when you can see the street names are the same, but someone can't walk. It takes 15 minutes to walk the equivalent of 2 houses because of the separation of the highway, so done by the highway. So this is Meach Street, again, Canisius still on the left. We're just alongside of the campus. So we'll turn right onto Loring. And when we get to the end of this one block, we will not be able to continue on Loring because of the Kensington Expressway. That is another really interesting part of that 1937 map. Would you care to touch on this section of Humboldt Parkway on this map? And let's bring that map up again, please, Mark, that 1937 map.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
This blue line, north-south, in the middle of all that yellow is Humboldt Parkway.
Yeah, and I see we have with us now on screen Melissa from Canisius, and maybe you'd like to introduce yourself, Melissa. And I know this issue is one that you feel strongly about, because I've had the pleasure of joining in a program that Melissa and another Canisius professor, Devanya Havis, run that traces some of this history for students and professors.
Yeah, hello, my name is Melissa Moscow. I am an associate professor of philosophy at Canisius College, but I think more interestingly, I am one of the directors of the Immersion Eastside program at Canisius. The Immersion Eastside program at Canisius was founded about 10 years ago, originally as a way to mirror some of our international service immersion experiences within the Buffalo community. But as we've developed the program and grown the program and changed the program over the last 10 years, we've shifted our focus to develop a more historical understanding of the neighborhood that Canisius is located in. Canisius was founded here in Hamlin Park, originally to serve the predominantly German population that lived there. And the population has changed, but we don't believe our mission has. So just because there's a different population of people doesn't mean our relationship to that population should change. So part of what that means for us is understanding the way in which the East Side has been crafted by racist policies over the last 100 years. Looking at the ways in which economic disinvestment through redlining, or economic disinvestment by not having banks in these neighborhoods has really shaped the landscape of the East Side. And one of the things that I'm personally passionate about is the 33, and the way in which, as Seamus was saying, the 33 just cut through a community and changed forever the values of the homes on either side, and in many ways, a lot of the life prospects for the people on either side of the 33.
So we just passed that beautiful stone building there was the home 60 Headley of the Restore Our Community Coalition and others, who is leading the fight for the future of Humboldt Parkway, to put the park back in Parkway, and encourage everybody to get involved. We stay on that subject. ROCC, Restore Our Community Coalition, rockbuffalo.org. I will, if y'all will allow me a slight diversion here. We're turning right onto Jefferson, back onto Jefferson. So that little loop around Hamlin Park, which is amazing, all these things considered, all these forces against this neighborhood from redlining and beyond, that this neighborhood has persisted to be so dense with predominantly home ownership, with mostly the exception of a lot of student housing, but officially a historic district now. But the diversion I want to make a little bit here is, as we turn right onto Main Street, for the cyclists, the passionate cyclists among us here, this is a really dangerous stretch for cyclists. This, despite being a state designated bike route here on Main Street, right here, I have to take the whole lane here. There's 3 lanes on the other side, some strange yellow median that serves no purpose. And I was almost hit here last week by 2 consecutive cars. We voiced our concerns through Go Bike Buffalo has a letter that anyone can copy and send to the city. We voiced our concerns in a forum with the Department of Public Works, and it's just not really working. And so it's so frustrating because Mayor Brown lives here in Hamlin Park in this neighborhood, so he's only a couple blocks away, and it says to me, like, 1, he doesn't bike, and 2, maybe he just doesn't care. But this is something that we really have to stay on as a cycling community, especially when you consider that this is designated as a state cycling route. Can imagine people passing through saying, this is a state route, this is what how Buffalo treats it. But I live right around here now, and it's really dangerous. So I want to focus entirely overall on redlining tonight, but I can't help but make that diversion here because this is a really dangerous stretch for cyclists. We are going to make a left here onto Humboldt Parkway. We're going over the expressway now, where it transitions from Kensington to Scajaquada. And we'll get into the Parkside neighborhood now, and we'll turn right onto Woodward and then to Jewett, go past the Darwin Martin House. This is a neighborhood that this is the green and the blue part of that was spared from the policies of redlining. And so this is Melissa, not exactly the focus. Your focus, we'll cross over to the other side and see it. But your focus, can you tell us a little more about this Immersion East Side? Because I love, this is a program that did not exist at Canisius when I was a student there, but I'd love to learn more about it and get involved.
So we have students for about 12 days in the summer. It's paired with a fully academic course. We call it an Ignatian seminar. And the goal is to do some academic study on, so for instance, we cover Black theology and pair that with the role of Black churches in predominantly Black communities, and visits to Bethel AME or to True Bethel, and meeting with religious leaders. We read, of course, about redlining and economic disinvestment, and we get a wonderful tour of the East Side from PPG to go along with that. We read about the arts and culture. One of the things that's important to us is that doesn't just become poverty tourism or poverty voyeurism, and that to really celebrate the long-standing histories of resilience and resistance in the East Side of Buffalo. We have a great partner in George Scott down at the Colored Musicians Club, who's also a Canisius grad, and he tells a very powerful story about the way that the Buffalo music scene has been impacted by the presence of one of the only Black unions of musicians up in in the Rust Belt. And so we have all of these academic components, learning about the history of cities like Buffalo, paired with meetings with community partners. And that means that we're reaching out to residents in the East Side, various community groups, the block clubs in Hanlon Park, the land trusts down in the Fruit Belt, various kind of urban farms and urban gardens to talk about ecological development and ecological reclamation, to really expose students to both the history of the East Side community, the challenges that have been faced by residents and communities in the East Side, but also to learn what people are doing. It's not a story of helplessness, and it's not a story of despair and desperation. It's a story of struggle, of course, but it's also a story of resilience and resistance. And we want to kind of find those stories too, and really give voice and presence to those stories through community members. And so students spend 12 days with us in the summer, not this summer because of COVID, but they spend 12 days with us in the summer, and then they have a full academic course in the fall where they produce some sort of project. Our last group produced a series of podcasts working with community members, some professors on campus, to talk about gentrification, homelessness, and community policing.
I'm so glad, Melissa, that you share that, and especially just that perspective on, that there's so much positivity to share here. There's so much resiliency. We definitely try to use that asset-based approach as well. We're not talking about this, as I said a little while ago, for the sake of making us all feel bad about where we are still. We're talking about it to look for solutions and to highlight partners at the neighborhood level that are already doing this work. So yeah, I think it's so important too, as we remember, this was all official government policy for many decades, right? Redlining and these other tools that led to this segregation. So it wasn't an accident, it was intentional public policy. And just that fact and realization can be very disheartening. But on the other hand, if public policy created this situation, different public policy can end it, right? And we can make choices, better choices that address these issues.
Right, and one of the goals for us is to create what Paulo Freire calls political literacy in our students, that it's not just about understanding the history, but feeling that sense of agency, that there's something that can be done. and kind of pairing the academic with the kind of social immersion, we feel is a good way to bring students to that.
That's wonderful.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Melissa, because like I said, I wish that program existed when I was a student at Canisius. How can people get involved?
Well, students at Canisius can look for flyers to register, usually in the spring. We also do a faculty and staff immersion in the fall. But if people are interested in supporting the program, we can always use funding. We have it as a goal that no student should be kind of turned away from the program because they can't afford it. And so we offer a lot of scholarships to our students so that they can attend the program in the summer. And if you get in contact with Canisius and say you want to, donate $20 to Immersion Eastside, they'll go directly to our students next year.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
And if I'm a partner and want to show my students around the East Side, we can do that. Maybe we can get them all on bikes next year, Seamus. I don't know. I don't know if our liability waiver at Canisius is gonna cover that.
Maybe we can cover that for you. Let's keep in touch. Thank you so much, Dr. Melissa Mosco from Canisius College. Yes, indeed. Keep in touch. Mark, we're going to pause it right here, right there on that mural, please. And maybe we'll go back a little if we can. We'll bring in our next guest. Andrea, I'll have you do the honor.
Absolutely. So we have just crossed back to the east side of Main Street here, and we're going to bring in Alma from Buffalo Arts Studio and invite Alma to introduce herself. So here she is. Wonderful.
Hello.
Hello, Alma. I don't know if we're struggling with the connection with Alma.
Okay, let's see. Are you with us?
Oh, no. Why don't we have, she was there waiting patiently to come in. Why don't we ask Alma to reconnect? And while we're waiting, we'll just to set up the scene here. So we've just crossed over Main Street. We're still on Jewett. We're on the side of Jewett that doesn't get as much attention as, for example, where we were just before in the Parkside neighborhood, the Darwin Martin House, where we'll be back there, and we had plans to have Slow Roll there in August, and we'll do something around that. In the meantime, we're here at the Tri-Main building, which is at Main and Jewett. And just as this extends to the east, the Tri-Main building it's just a huge plot of land where, and a huge building itself. But there is a mural here, and I don't know, is Alma able to rejoin us? I think she's going to have to. Mark, we want to disconnect her, and so we'll try to reconnect. Okay, we'll try.
Yeah, I can share a little story about Jewett first, Seamus, and then hopefully
Sure.
Alma will be back with us. So, what is also interesting to note about these issues of redlining and refusing to invest in certain neighborhoods is really how long citizens have been working, residents have been advocating to address these issues, right? So in our report that Seamus mentioned, A City Divided, it's called on our website, in 1975, there was the Erie County Citizens Organization, and they released a report that claimed, the root causes of the blight, the issues we're seeing in Buffalo is redlining and disinvestment. And back then in 1975, they studied 13 banks over a period of almost 2 years and noted that only a quarter of all the mortgages in the county were given within the city, right? And we know how our city and county population break down. So that's, again, very much in line with kind of where different races live. What's interesting, though, is that the report also highlighted a particular example of a sale of a home on Jewett Avenue. And I knew that Seamus was going to be showing us this big stretch of Jewett to really show the difference. So it was a home on this side of Jewett Avenue where we are now. The buyers were initially approved for a loan by the Erie County Savings Bank at the time, but later it was denied because the property was located in a labeled high-risk area. And so for all these decades, there's been individuals, kind of losing out on this mortgage funding, which we'll talk about a little bit more, I know, with another guest down the line. But I just thought, here we are on Jewett, and that was documented way back in 1975.
Wow. And so we'll see a little something coming up here to bring it even closer to the present. There was just a report this morning from ProPublica about that the federal government is not currently pursuing ongoing cases of redlining as it did in previous administrations. And there were 6 cases cited by ProPublica that have not been pursued. But the previous administration likely would have. And an example of that, to bring it to the local level, is when we get here, when we continue on Jewett, we'll stay here for a minute, but when we continue, we'll get to Fillmore, and we'll see, this is something I just noticed for the first time on this ride. We'll see a beautiful old commercial building, 2-story building that is boarded up, but appears to be under reconstruction. And there is a sign outside of it saying that it's another proud project of Evans Bank. And so I think that's significant to bring up here. We'll only really pass by it on the route, and we'll see the rest of Jewett as we get closer to Kensington. But can you share the example here, the 2014 example of Evans Bank? Because I imagine there are some who might be listening here and saying, okay, well, that all happened a long time ago, and that's we're past that point. But we have an example locally of how we're not.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, so we're lucky to have folks still advocating for all this. And so as recently as 2014, as Seamus said, Evans Bank was charged with redlining by the New York State Attorney General. And it was found that not only was their lending, almost non-existent to Black borrowers, it was found that in a 3-year period, 2009 to 2012, less than 1% of their home mortgages from Evans Bank went to Black borrowers. But also even the way they were marketing their services, marketing the availability of their bank and their mortgages was very racially motivated as well. So it turned out they had a map that defined their trade area, their marketing area, and they had a pink line around the east side of Buffalo to exclude it. So, this was even found. I don't know why it was pink and not red, but it certainly didn't get them out of it. And they were, found to be actively redlining in 2014. And
for all the deep research that you and the Partnership for the Public Good does, anyone who's interested in this, they can find it through the Partnership for the Public Good, ppgbuffalo.org, but they can also just Google Buffalo redlining, and they'll get a bunch of results from local media to the New York Times about this case in 2014 that was settled. And I wonder if this project that we'll see coming up here at Jewett and Fillmore this would be in the zone that Evans Bank said to not invest in as recently as 6 years ago. Before we get moving again, I don't know, we don't have Alma back. We wanted to bring in Alma from Buffalo Art Studio, which is located in the Tri-Main building here. And this mural here done by the great Dan Gallis was part of a celebration just a couple years ago of the centennial, right, of the Tri-Main building. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was for the centennial. When Slow Roll was here at the Tri-Main building in 2017, this mural was still in the works. And Dan actually, it was a hot summer day, and Dan got out and did some work on it live as we were riding around. And it's come together so beautifully. I would encourage everyone to come here, and I will tell you exactly where the corner is, and it will give me a chance to brag about winning the PPG Jeopardy over the winter, because there was a whole category for public art intersections, and this is Jewett and Halbert behind the Tri-Main building. So Mark, let's resume the ride here as we continue on Jewett. And so we've paused for a bit here, and I ask everybody who's been watching to remember how beautiful the homes were on Jewett in the Parkside neighborhood and the condition of them that have been kept up in the historic district. To see how it's changed, to understand when people, there are so many, really nonsensical stigmas about why conditions are different in different parts of Buffalo. But if you really want to know, you can look to organizations like the Partnership for the Public Good, who has done the research to examine these institutional factors that lead us to be really a tale of two cities. And so we are on the east side of Jewett. And again, if you missed that part, if you're just tuning in, just think of the Darwin Martin House. That's on the west side of Jewett on Main Street. Here's that building here that apparently Evans Bank is involved in the redevelopment of. And so now we're east of Fillmore. And I know that a lot of folks don't know that Jewett Avenue continues this long, or Jewett Parkway, maybe. Pardon me. But it continues here another few blocks past Holden and to Hill. And so we'll wrap around here from Jewett to Leroy and come back down Kensington to the Trinidad neighborhood. And I don't know if Ellen will be able to join us, but we'll touch on why she was going to try to call in, because they're having their first gathering of the Trinidad Neighborhood Association, their first in-person gathering in a few months. And today she was talking, we were talking while she was spacing out the chairs in the park right by a mural that they've made. And we'd love if Alma was able to join to talk about that significance. But we'll see it when we get there. I guess in the meantime, in the absence of Alma herself, you're going to mention why you wanted to have her on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have so many partners in the arts, including the wonderful Buffalo Arts Studio, who really have a lot to say about the role of the arts education in bringing together divided communities. What we're looking at here in Buffalo is that we're still a community divided by Main Street, among other lines, physical and imagined lines. And the role of the arts can really help to address these divisions, to create new conversations, and also to just provide some really beautiful opportunities for expression from folks who are living in the neighborhoods we're riding through today, impacted and growing up among these issues and the very current ongoing legacies of segregation as well. And just to speak a little bit to your points too, Seamus, around conditions and why do these two sides look so differently? Of course, we're saying it's around investment, the just non-availability of funds to own your home, to then take out a little small home equity loan and get a new roof, right? The list goes on. And again, it's so important where you live. We have other maps at PPG. We won't pull up all the endless maps, but that redlining map, the 1937 map that we have pulled up a couple times, you can pull up today's lead poisoning maps of the city of Buffalo, childhood lead poisoning. And it's almost a perfect overlay, right? The red areas have the highest percentages of lead exposure. You can then pull up where are the most water shutoffs, which households are facing water shutoffs because they can't afford to pay their water bill. Again, it mirrors and echoes those lines. Places that have the highest, what's called a housing burden, where you have to spend more than half of your income on your housing. Again, it's in these very blocks and these very neighborhoods that had the redlining. And so the legacy kind of goes on and on, is reinforced in these ways today. And we've had partners. I have a quote up here from, I know, a figure who has been in slow roll. India Walton, who's now the director of the Fruit Belt Land Trust, and she's been in our projects as, you know, a local Black mom as well. And she has said to us, I spend more than half of my income on housing, but at least there's no chipping lead paint or leaks or conditions that some of my neighbors are forced to endure because they can't afford another option. This causes a lot of stress for my neighbors. And as a mom of 4 boys, I often think of everything I could do for them if my housing and energy costs weren't so high, and if we had sports and other after-school programs here in our neighborhood, right? So you can really sense from that how, again, where you live, that neighborhood determines so much about a person's life, of course. Another piece, Seamus, if we want to bring in our next guest, is, of course, the accessibility of jobs and the role of public transit as well.
Yes, let's do that now. I will say, pardon me for a second. I'm going to run off the screen to plug in my laptop before it dies. I just realized I didn't plug it in. But I want to say, too, before we bring in Simon, we're making a left here back onto Fillmore and headed towards Kensington. So we came off of Leroy there, and I appreciate what Dr. Melissa Moscow from Canisius said earlier about how we're arranging for tours as part of Immersion Eastside with Canisius. It's related to what we're doing here. Like, this is, I want to make clear in case anyone is confused, this is not a poverty tour. We are here to talk about history, solutions, and connect community. We will dwell on the solutions plenty over the course of this, but to really understand the present, to understand and really connect with our community, you have to understand these factors that contributed to Buffalo being the 3rd poorest city in America, the 6th most segregated city in America. We come with intention to make these authentic connections. So when we're riding down Leroy, we know that Rogerline Williamson runs the Leroy Avenue Block Club, and we check in and we make these connections all over the city. We're not here to just ride through and talk about problems. We're here to make the true connections. And so I guess maybe that's a good segue to, do we have Alma back though? We'll tell Simon to hold if we can bring Alma in.
Yes, let's try Alma. And Simon, thank you for your patience. Alma has emailed saying she keeps getting an error message. So let's try it one more time here. Hello, my friend, are you there?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
I changed 3 computers.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Well, thank you so much for joining.
Glad it's working out.
We had a nice talk at the mural there beside Buffalo Art Studio, but we would love to hear from you. Seamus had me just say why I had wanted to invite you, which was really to say, in the context of everything that we're talking about, the arts has such an important role of bringing divided communities together, of offering expression to people. So we'd love for you to just reflect on that in the context of, running a wonderful, engaged arts center in a segregated community.
Well, Buffalo Art Studio is an organization. It's pretty big. It has about 20,000 square feet of space, and about 32 artists have their studios within our space. We also have exhibition space, and it's really important for us to really reflect our community. So we put a lot of emphasis on really, seeing who has a studio with us, who gets access to the arts through us. Is really important to do that. And the nice thing about Tri-Main is that it's a microcosm of it's a reflection of our region. They have so many other nonprofit organizations, service organizations, they have small businesses. It really reflects what Buffalo looks like. So we try to go into concentric circles to make sure that we touch and serve our community as it expands broader and broader. And we put a lot of effort into ensuring that arts access means that it's only not opening your doors, but really that the artwork reflects the people that live in the neighborhood, that access the neighborhood services as well. So for us, is one of the ways that we give a voice to voices that are often not incorporated or included in gallery spaces. We are not focused on just selling artwork. We want our artists to sell art, but for us, it's really about the conversation that happens and the engagement that happens. You can have an artist talking about work that reflects a legacy of for instance, of slavery, and speaking about those memories lost, and really connecting to a new refugee arrived, a person who just arrived as a refugee, and making those connections of the memories or the items that got lost, and how those memories get recreated through pieces of fabric or artwork that that brings those memories. So for us, a lot has to do with really bringing the different voices together. So we do a lot of, even our mural work includes a lot of community engagement. We know that our artists are so talented and they can make beautiful things, but how can we expand on that and actually bring our work to the community or to the neighborhoods that is, that really connects to them on a personal level? And so we do a lot of work around those lines. I'm trying to speak fast.
No need. Take your time. I unfortunately I didn't get a good shot of this new mural here. So we are now in the Trinidad neighborhood, and we're on Loring. So we were on Loring before when we were right next to Canisius. We're back on Loring, but it's completely severed from Hamlin Park in the Canisius neighborhood. Did you know there's a new mural here in Trinidad?
No, I want to check it out.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And unfortunately, I didn't get a good shot at it. And Mark was all ready to pause it, and he said, "Where is it?" And I should have just stopped there. But it's at the end of Loring Avenue there. There is the Trinidad Neighborhood Association right now, as we speak, is having their first in-person neighborhood meeting in the past 4 months, right at that mural. And that mural was made through the city's Love Your Block grant program. So the new president of the Trinidad Neighborhood Association, Ellen Harris Harvey, said she applied for this Love Your Block grant to put a mural there to show the pride that they have in the neighborhood, and to use it as a means of revitalizing the park space that we just went past. And so I'm sure that's something that that you reflect on in your work a lot, about what public art can do.
Yes, I mean, that it's very important. There are different organizations that have a different focus through their art services. For us, it's really about making arts accessible, and very much like the group you mentioned, it's about what, how does this artwork speak to the neighborhood who lives there, and how can we elevate and really celebrate and cherish or speak to themes that are important to the neighborhood. It's really important, and not every artist that we work with focus on that, but it's a very big focus for us. A few years ago, we started really transitioning into more of a social justice theme in a lot of our artwork, a lot of our exhibitions, and it's also trickles down into the work that happens with our educational program. So it is really great to hear that so many other groups feel empowered to take on the projects that really speak to who they are. So I'm very excited to see that mural. So thank you for letting me know.
Sure thing. I wish I had a better, I don't know what happened with my camera angle here. I hope that works itself out. But I did a couple loops. I'm at a red light at Kensington and Maine. So I did a couple loops to show the expressway. If as we turn back onto Maine, and before we bring in our next guest, Alma, I want to ask first of all, and Andrew, if you have anything else to add while we have Alma, please do. But how can people get involved with Buffalo Art Studio?
You can reach us through social media or through our website, or just send me an email. Our emails, my email is alma@buffaloartstudio.org. We hope to have classes back at some point when it's safe to do so. But we are opening our galleries to the public on the 28th of this month. This is July 28th. And we don't expect the big crowds to come all at once. We have 20,000 square feet of space. So it would be, we are making finding every possible way to make it as safe and enjoyable for everyone. And we have Idris Wyatt. He's going to be opening on the 24th. It's going to be a great exhibition that really speaks to the moment. It's a reflection of the work of this, pandemic and the time that we have been here. So I'm excited to see the work as well.
That sounds amazing, Alma, and we can't wait to be back in your space. I think it was perfect timing, despite your technical frustration, because you talked about public memory, the role of the arts in public memory, and we know of big projects coming out of Alabama, for example, parts of the South where we have the new big national memorial to lynching. We have an artist that Buffalo Art Studio was going to bring in March, and PPG was going to partner, who actually literally recolors the Confederate flag and kind of challenges and confronts the meaning of that flag. And I often think, what are the public memory projects that we really need in Buffalo that would retell and re-engage certain issues? And I almost always think of, indeed, the removal of the Humboldt Parkway and the Kensington Expressway and everything it did to that community and the wider Black community in Buffalo as just such a huge source still for public memory projects. Hopefully quite active ones that would really advance the goal of ROC as well.
Total agreement.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And that's great news about reopening at the end of this month, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys. Enjoy your ride.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Take care. And so I clearly somehow tilted my camera up a little bit here. And so, Mark, why don't we remove that banner as much as we love our logo and Independent Health, our logo, which was designed by Idris Wajed, as our shirt is. As long as we seem to invoke Idris on a weekly basis. What an amazing artist and human. So I remove that banner so we can get a better look here on Main Street. And let's bring in our next guest.
Very good. So we know Simon is with us, and we'll have Simon introduce themselves soon, from Buffalo Transit Riders United. Transportation really compounds the issues of segregation. The impacts of segregation are only worsened by the transportation issues that we have here in Buffalo. So we'll let Simon tell us more about that. We often cite at PPG that we have over 50,000 households in our metro region without a vehicle. Almost 1/3 of the city's households don't have a car. And of course, that makes it very difficult to access jobs. In recent months, that's made it very difficult to access healthcare. And again, our segregated geography makes all that more important. So welcome, Simon. We look forward to hearing from you about this.
Hold just off for a second, Simon. I'll just let you know we just turned left. We just turned off of Main Street. We're now headed south on Maston and working our way back downtown. Pardon me, Simon, take it away.
For a profession, I work in real estate as well, and it's so great to kind of hear sometimes the progress that's been made, especially between banks and real estate agents, because quite frankly, even it's not just banks, it's kind of a consortium of different institutions that have kind of made the challenges that we see today. A lot of real estate agents have done, blockbusting, kind of incentivizing longtime owners to sell their properties to kind of get out of a neighborhood that they are kind of fueling this idea that it's going downhill. There's plenty of real estate agents who do steering, who try to perceive where someone wants to live and not show them all the options. So, and then obviously with banks, there's places where they will not give you the money, or they will give you money but not enough to repair the roof, and because the appraisal doesn't feel it's worthy enough. So I think all that kind of creates this huge challenge in Western New York, where we see a lot of growth happening in areas that are not accessible by people who do not own a car. We can just even look at like contemporary examples, like look at where all of one of the most fastest growing companies in our nation, Amazon. Where is it producing all the local jobs? Miles away from the nearest bus stop. Its first warehouse was on Walden Avenue in Lancaster, pretty close to the town line with Alden. The second one was on River Road in Tonawanda, and the next one that it wants to build is in Grand Island, place you have to actually spend money in order to actually enter the island. But also, if no bus line actually kind of goes off, it just goes through Grand Island. It doesn't actually stop in Grand Island. And so these are challenges that a lot of people who, if they need employment, if they need an opportunity to make money, there's just a humongous challenges to actually reaching these places. Buffalo Transit Riders United is actually one of 3 different campaigns started by Coalition for Economic Justice, which is a group that, you know, it's all about trying to bring more equity to working class folks. And it's been a real challenge to kind of just tell people honestly that like there are people hurting, and that that there's just a lack of even awareness that like, oh, great, there's more jobs coming, but are they even accessible? People worry a lot about like, is there enough parking? Well, is there enough bus stops, to actually get someone to this location? So I have to say, like, between all the sprawl that's kind of been the result of redlining, where if banks aren't going to loan aren't going to grant a loan here, well, then a lot of people are going to look elsewhere to build a house or to buy a house. And we've seen over the decades much more greenfield development. There is more mindfulness to kind of slow that down and to reinvest in the city. One of the big things is to help push for that, because if we can get more infill development going on, we can have more efficiency on our bus lines that, unfortunately, since the Great Recession, have been seeing slight reductions in service. Well, a humongous reduction in service in 2012, and then actually since COVID-19 has had 2 different cuts going on since then. And it's it's quite a big challenge,
Absolutely, Simon. And, I just want to thank you for bringing up, as I mentioned, there are many tools that have promoted segregation, and those real estate tools that you mentioned of block busting and steering, I'm told have been very common over the decades in Buffalo. So those are important to highlight as well. And we break those down a little bit in our segregation report. And then, the really big points, right, that equally important as improving public transit is locating more jobs in or near communities of color and along the public transit routes that we have. And again, that's a public policy decision that we can make, friends, right? So we know that from New York State down to the local level, there are tax incentives and programs and rewards for businesses that bring jobs to the region. And you can add what's called smart growth or transit-oriented development as a criteria to those programs. So if you want the tax cut, if you want the incentive, as Simon said, Amazon, whatever, bring the jobs here, but put them beside a public transit line, or you won't get the tax break, right? Like I certainly believe reaching a point where we can be specific about the type of development we want. I say it like that because I feel like for some years, the mindset in Buffalo has been, we need to say yes to all development. We just have to say yes to it all without setting these criteria and saying what kind of development and therefore what kind of a community do we want. So we'd love to hear more, I think, about Buffalo Transit Riders United kind of specific platform. I know some of the work you've done over the years to get more of a stronger rider's voice in NFTA decision-making, for example. Anything you want to tell us about the ride, Seamus, before we turn it back to Simon?
Oh, thank you. Good timing, because we just turned on to Dodge off of Maston. And so it's a bit of a reflection for those who have been watching us ride down Maston. Again, I mentioned, compared to Linwood. So when we're talking about areas of investment and areas of disinvestment in Buffalo, and we've shown those maps that go back 80 years, look at Maston. Maston is a great street to ride north to south. Linwood is the gold standard. It's got the contraflow bike lane. Beyond that, it's lined with trees. Contrast it with Maston. Maston is, at least it got paved in a couple years ago, but they haven't even put any paint on it. It's just these issues of institutional disinvestment persist today. We can look at these maps from 1937 and show where it's rooted on a federal level, but it continues today. So we're coming. heading now west on Dodge, and we're going to. I made a little boo-boo here, and I'm going to turn left onto Ellicott. So everybody close their eyes. It's a one-way street for a few blocks, and I forgot that. But we're going to turn left on Ellicott to enter back into the medical campus area, and we'll stop there. And so we'll have a little more time to talk about not only, Simon, what you're about to talk about, but as we get into the home stretch. To ask just people to reflect here as you're watching too, when we turn on to Ellicott. The Ellicott that people maybe identify as downtown and medical campus, which you can see beyond, it looks a little different right here. It's in horrible condition. The street is in horrible condition. And so we'll pause as we get to Best on the edge of the medical campus, and we'll bring up that map. But please, Simon, continue where you were.
Well, yeah. So honestly, things have changed quite a bit in the last 6 months. Before COVID-19, our focus was, and it still is, on having more bus riders at the leadership board of NFTA. Right now, the whole board that oversees NFTA is a governor-appointed body, which kind of has its own problems. Like, how much does the governor really even know about bus riders here in Buffalo? So we've been pushing for basically a state bill that would add 2 bus riders to the decision-making body that oversees NFTA. And this is very important because, quite frankly, bus riders should be involved in the solutions to help the bus system. They're the ones who use it. They're the ones who depend on it. Since COVID-19 took the oxygen out from everything going on in our world, we've been very worried about cuts to the service. Through the CARES Act, the U.S. CARES Act, there was an infusion of $61 million that we, much us and a bunch of other organizations across the nation, kind of were like, throw money at the transit authorities before they start cutting service. So the $61 million is part of a package of transit one-time funding. That's about half of what the NFTA spends in a typical year. And so it's helped stave off some cuts, but the NFTA has cut the Route 7 and the 29 and the 54 since the infusion of cash came in early April, mostly because of service. So we're trying to keep people mindful and aware that, like, service has been cut. We don't want a repeat of 2012 where we saw cuts and we never saw restoration. We saw cuts because of budget cuts, because it was a post-Great Recession time. People are still going to need the service. People are still can't afford a car. Nor should everyone be driving a car either. But there's going to need to be time to keep notice that, like, bus riders have endured a lot through this pandemic, and we are asking for fair treatment, just like how motor vehicle users get. And luckily, there has been some mindfulness from the county level and the state level about also providing access to testing sites that are not just drive-throughs, but also walk-ups. We've celebrated that the Jericho Road Center they too have at Broadway Fillmore. We definitely need to present more access for testing that isn't just a drive-through. And so it's definitely, COVID-19 has definitely taken up a lot of the attention on all transit issues, because it's taken up the air on a lot of different things. And we hope as we return to normal, we can also see some restoration of service cuts to happen as a result of COVID-19.
Simon, can you tell us about, while we're right here on the medical campus with the fruit belt to the left, there was a recent victory for the transit riders here, yeah?
Well, there was the there were amendments finally. It was NMTA did engage with some, did actually do some public engagement, did listen to bus riders, and did amend the Route 8, the Route 16, and the 14, so that it would those buses would actually serve the neighborhood, not just kind of bypass the neighborhood so they can get to the medical campus. So that happened about 3 months before COVID-19 hit. It was a big victory, especially for the neighborhood of the Fruit Belt, because it's just kind of like, I believe the route went through Carlton. So they basically rerouted it so that it would actually kind of go through the middle of the neighborhood, or look, close enough to the middle of the neighborhood instead of bypassing around it. And that's huge, because a lot of people who live in the Fruit Belt are dependent on the bus route, and to walk, 5 blocks is, especially in the winter, is a lot. So that was a huge win for sure.
And Simon, I think I'd love you to stay on as a real estate agent. Of course, you don't have to comment in that capacity. But Seamus, I think in a way it's fitting that our slow roll here on redlining and segregation has ended with this view of the new medical campus. This, a positive development in some ways, in other ways has caused a lot of worry and fear among local residents, as I'm sure you've heard, from the Fruit Belt neighborhood representatives you meet with, but even our broader partner community. Is this a symbol showing that could Buffalo actually go directly from this long period of redlining, segregation, disinvestment, vacant lots and abandoned homes? Could we go from that status straight into kind of real estate speculation and gentrification? That's the real question right now. And with this medical campus, it has certainly created a little small hot market reaching into the east side, where from Main Street here back east over to Jefferson is kind of close enough to the medical campus to really be trying to attract new residents, to be seeing this investment spike start in the east side. That hasn't reached all parts of the east side at all yet, but that is certainly a worry that we're hearing. Are we really going to go from this period of disinvestment and redlining and kind of skyrocket straight into speculation and gentrification? And I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that.
I think about this all the time, and the truth of the matter is, it's all about helping first-time home buyers, helping people buy their first house, because those are the people who do not have cash on hand to make a lot purchase or a foreclosure auction purchase, like a lot of heavy-handed investors can. Once we have luckily programs through KeyBank, through a lot of financial institutions that will pretty much grant matching dollars for first-time home buyers. They will do a lot to kind of balance the scale, because right now, especially in high competitive markets, a lot of sellers are going to look at the cash buyer and say, oh, he's quick money, let's go with that. Or worse come worse, especially with this COVID-19 crisis and the economic fallout of it, if people can't pay their property tax bills or their mortgage, then we're going to see high foreclosures. And once it goes into a foreclosure auction or a tax auction, that is where the cash buyer loves it, because they can, they have the money, they can, they can basically kind of buy it within the 30-day process that they need to get it done. And that's not the thing that's afforded to a renter who's trying to transition from renting to owning. And so I think I'm hoping, especially with another stimulus package, we can kind of even further balance that scale and make sure that in the future we can have more small homeowner, or just even if it's just like a person owning 2 properties instead of a conglomerate owning, a whole block of parcels. And I hope that's what's going to kind of slow down the gentrification or the displacement we might fear so much about.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And there's just a whole range of kind of housing issues that build off of redlining. We could have a whole housing focused session, Seamus, sometime too.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. That's why we knew this that this theme of a Redline ride would hopefully be the start of a series, and so that is certainly our intention. So, Simon, before we let you go and bring in our next guest, how can people get in touch and get involved with the Coalition for Economic Justice and Buffalo Transit Riders United?
Probably the easiest way, because there's many ways, but the easiest way would probably be just to message us on Facebook, Buffalo Transit Riders United, or CEJ Buffalo. Either one, you'd either get me, Holly, one of our staff organizers, Diane. We always love to kind of invite people to get involved in any way they want to, or any way they can, or with any idea they have. Because one of the best things about doing any organizing is really welcoming people in and finding a way for them to get involved. Having more people at the table is always better.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your continued work, Simon. It's good to see you, and keep in touch.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So, Andrea, we have Catherine Franco on the line, and as we bring Catherine in, we want to bring up that map again. Please mark that 1998 map that was just up. Now, there's a really interesting thing about this. So now we juxtapose that 1937 map of the federal investment guidelines, which produced the term redlining. 60 years later, this is a City of Buffalo planning document, and we basically see the results of it. Now it's marked red with a different connotation and the one interesting thing I want to bring up, this map while we're paused right here on the medical campus, is that pretty much right in the middle, and it's hard to see, but this is a document, and again, anybody can just Google Buffalo redlining. This is one of the first images that will come up. This is this refers to so we're saying here we're looking south, headed toward downtown on Ellicott. That's Buffalo General on the left. Further to the left, to the east, is the Fruit Belt. And we've talked a lot about the Fruit Belt. People who are familiar with Slow Roll should know plenty by now. On this map, the Fruit Belt has been eliminated. And it says only Medical Park. And it's that sort of almost kind of Tennessee-shaped area right in the middle. And it's almost all red, but there's a little white. I wonder if you care to touch on the apparently proposed elimination of the Fruit Belt with the development of the medical campus.
Yeah, I'd love to know what you know about this 1998 map, Seamus, if you know more than I do. But what was super interesting that developed, and we should send around a couple of articles, was it maybe a year or two ago, that real focus on the medical campus, actually led to, on Google Maps even, there was no more Fruit Belt name, and it just said Medical Park. And, that's a phenomenon we see in other cities. I know that near Columbia University in New York, they're calling it Manhattanville instead of the part of Harlem that it was. And, we see this repeated of this rebranding of certain neighborhoods. Again, if you're moving to Buffalo to be a physician, to be whatever at the medical campus, it makes sense to live in Medical Park, right? So it's all part of this rebranding to attract capital and attract new residents. But Fruit Belt residents, the real active group that they are, of course, advocated and have very much gotten the name back on online maps, as well as, I would say, more strongly recognized locally as well. I mean, the Fruit Belt never went away, only the name on certain maps did, for sure.
And I don't know probably any more than you on that. I just, in looking at this in the last week and talking with some folks in the Fruit Belt, was wondering if, so the articles that came out were basically people were saying, hey, Google, get your act together. Why did you eliminate the Fruit Belt? And Google's basically had no idea. They couldn't identify how it happened. But I wonder if it was tied to that planning document, or, I mean, that's the first time the earliest that document that I've seen, and you've seen in a lot more of these.
Yeah, 98 is certainly
Fruit belt doesn't
old for
exist.
that. And of course, it's just important to say, and then I saw Catherine pop up, so we should bring her
Yes.
in, is that, names matter and identity matters and belonging matters. And I think that is one of the strongest lessons that I have from the Fruit Belt community's work to respond to the arrival of the medical campus at the doorstep of their community is their strong sense of belonging to their neighborhood, their sense that they have a right to belong and a right to determine the future of their own neighborhood. And that name piece is a real symbol of, I think, what's a much larger piece of work and fight for them.
Right, and so again, we're talking about problems, we're talking about solutions as well, and so we've spent a lot of time on our rides and on our free time in the work that's unseen to support that Fruit Belt Community Land Trust. That's a solution. So when we talk about the problems of disinvestment, and we look at the solutions of being grassroots, ground level, community control of their neighborhoods, Community Land Trust is one of the solutions, and we will continue to support the Fruit Belt Community Land Trust. So we only didn't go right into the Fruit Belt on this ride because we've been there for 2 of the last 3 rides, the previous 3 rides. So let's bring in Catherine and let's continue the ride as we go further downtown towards back to our round trip back to the Partnership for the Public Good, and you'll see some of our squad hanging out at the end. And Andrea, I'll allow you to bring in Catherine.
So Catherine Franco, thank you for joining us. Catherine is with the Western New York Law Center and the Buffalo Niagara Community Reinvestment Coalition.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. How would you like me to begin?
So, my friend Catherine, we have just done pretty much a 90-minute tour crisscrossing Main Street in East and West Buffalo and really talking about the differences, redlining. We've touched on Evans Bank and how this work continues to counter discrimination and redlining. And so we'd love to, I think, hear about the coalition and the work you're doing directly to counter this history.
So I was able to catch some of this. I'm sorry that I'm not able to be seen. I promise that I have really good facial expressions that would help with this conversation. But I was able to hear some of what you all were talking about at the end there. And I just have to say that it's really heartening to hear some of it. Andrew, you talking about belonging, also talking about, what these neighborhoods have looked like, what they will look like. And so then I guess that does bring me into the work of the coalition. So the Buffalo Niagara Community Reinvestment Coalition is a coalition that's been around for the last 2 decades in different sorts of iterations. The most recent form, and that some people may know, maybe not everyone, and that's okay. But back in 1615, there was going to be a merger between Key Bank and First Niagara Bank, and essentially folks were really they were aware of this, and they wanted to make sure that there was enough banking here and enough banking that was going to serve communities, particularly communities of color, Black communities in Buffalo. And so what happened is we had a number of different organizations. The coalition at that time was just 3 member organizations that got together that were able to negotiate community benefits agreements with these 2 banks. And so those are agreements that come out of conversations with communities, hearing their concerns, and then putting together kind of goals and outlines for what the community would like to see the other party, in this instance, the banks, Key Bank and then Northwest Bank, what they would like to see come out of those agreements. So we were able to negotiate as the coalition 2 of those agreements over a 5-year period of time. Those are still ongoing. They end in 2022, I believe it is. And essentially what those looked at was saying, if First Niagara is going to leave, they've done a really great job in terms of banking, at providing first-time home ownership, mortgages for folks. And so we wanted to make sure that things like that remained. And so a lot of what these agreements are based off of is the framework of the Community Reinvestment Act, which was an act that came about in the 70s to kind of combat the effects of redlining. It was some of the last legislation to come out of the civil rights era, and it looked at 4 different areas specifically. So looking at mortgage loans, looking at small business loans, looking at philanthropy and community development lending and investment. So it was really trying to say banks, if they're going to exist in an area, if they're going to take money as deposits from the folks that live in these areas, they have an obligation to invest back into those communities. And so that's what those CBAs really reflected. So there are specific commitments that each bank has made around mortgages, but specifically, and I will say that even though the Community Reinvestment Act, it was to kind of combat the effects of redlining, it speaks nothing in its legislation to race. It speaks to income only. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So when we look at that and how these CBAs and the CRA works, it really looks at geography and income. So looking at mortgages for low to moderate income communities and individuals, the same for small business loans, and then the same for that community development lending and investment, which we would understand that to be affordable housing projects and things of that sort. And then also philanthropy, so making sure that initiatives that are going to help low to moderate income communities and individuals are being supported in ways that make sense in their localities. So we were able to go ahead and do those. We have discovered over time that that's really, really wonderful to have those CBAs and to be able to, as a small coalition, really use that moment of the merger as leverage to bring about increases in mortgage lending for Black folks and for communities of color, to increase small business lending. And we have seen increases in those areas over the past few years that we really truly believe wouldn't have happened if there weren't these community benefits agreements in place to hold the banks accountable to an extent. But what we've also seen is that disinvestment and that legacy is strong. So even when we look at commitment to and each bank had a commitment to open up a full service branch. And that means that you were able to come in and get loans, talk to a loan officer, these different things, not just necessarily meeting with a teller or having the ATM there, but actually doing more holistic banking services. Each bank opened one of those up on the east side of Buffalo. So one is on Jefferson, that's Northwest, and then KeyBank opened up their branch at the old Rite Aid that's across from ECMC right there on Griner. These things were really, really great. But, and I said in the beginning that maybe folks don't necessarily know about the work that we're doing. And I think that that's where some of the concern comes in, is that these are community benefits agreements. And even though there was community input to negotiate them, I think that oftentimes the community is left out of the conversations now that those negotiations have happened and that we've put these things into place. And although we're seeing increases in mortgages and all these other things, I think at times, particularly for me, I question, how is this reaching people in their everyday lives? And yes, particularly when we look at Buffalo and we know that the burden of home ownership is much less than a renter here in Buffalo, particularly in this moment in time, that it's great to be able to give people that sort of stability. But what else can we do? And do folks know about the programs and the services that exist to be able to help people get into homes, and that there are these CRA kind of obligations and that these CBAs exist to help folks, essentially reduce the wealth gap that exists because of the segregation and redlining. So that's just a little bit, but good. I'm glad you're giving me all this space.
No, I was going to say that's such a comprehensive introduction, Catherine, and thank you for that. And I think, yeah, it's following the work of the coalition to know that we have a group of advocates in Buffalo who are tracking what commitments are banks fulfilling? What does their lending look like? I know even recently you've all been asking questions around the federal recovery funds for small business owners, for example, and were businesses of color able to access those funds in Buffalo? And so to really, have this group tracking all of this, I think is really important.
Yeah. And the work evolves. So when we talk about kind of why the coalition exists, it really is to address kind of the inequalities in banking, and also to address the issues that come with redlining. So when we look at our communities and we look at the way in which mortgages are given out, and you talked about Evans Bank, which was just, in our very recent past, redlining still happens, steering still happens. So when you are, going to buy a home, even as a first-time home buyer, if you are a person of color, particularly if you're a Black person, you're often steered into certain communities. And Buffalo itself is quite segregated. And so what we see is that, and this was something that I've talked about time and time again, is that what we've seen is that it's really wonderful that people are able to get into these homes, but when we're trying to address kind of economic injustice and address the wealth gap, what we're seeing is that people are able to get into homes as first-time home buyers, as Black folks, and are able to take advantage of some of these programs. But what we're also seeing is that it's doing nothing to address the wealth gap, in part because so many of the neighborhoods in which they're steered, or that they are wanting to live, or for whatever reason, or that they can afford to live in, those homes, because of the disinvestment that has happened, because of the redlining that has happened, because of the policies that have continued to support what we see, many of those properties are not able to provide the equity that if you lived in different parts of our city that hadn't necessarily been redlined, that you could get that same sort of equity out of them. So we're providing people homes and providing that level of stability, but we're not doing a lot to address the wealth gap. And so I think that that's one of the things that we are looking to do, and really acknowledging, I think that that's part of why the coalition went ahead and did write a letter to the city. We know that COVID is something that has happened, but one of the things that I say time and time again is that COVID is a moment in time, and that COVID didn't bring about all of these issues and these concerns that have really come to a head. And when we look at kind of people's financial instability and how precarious people's situations are, those were issues that we have been dealing with and fighting with. And I say we, I'm talking about activists and advocates and nonprofit organizations and just people living that life that have been dealing with it before the time of COVID. I really believe that COVID has simply exacerbated a lot of these issues that are now coming to a head, and they are forced to be reckoned with in this moment. So that's part of the reason why we went ahead and sent a letter to the mayor, to the Common Council, and shared with them, you have this federal funding that is coming in to address the needs from COVID, but those needs are not simply a moment in time. These are needs that have existed, that will continue to exist, and we want to make sure that we're looking at things like rental assistance, that we're supporting our small landlords, that we are looking at small businesses who were unable to go ahead and take advantage of PPP loans, particularly our Black businesses who are really suffering from this. And also looking at mental health, looking at all of these different intersections, because when we think about our wealth and we think about that gap, there's so many things that impact it, and it isn't just necessarily how money comes in, but it really is our quality of life and how that happens. So that's one aspect there. But I think that there's also a responsibility of banks in this moment in time. So that is a lot of the work that the coalition has done for quite a while. And when we talk about redlining and we talk about that enduring impact that redlining has had on communities, and we still see it. And even as I was hearing Seamus kind of talk, being on Maston and talking about that lack of paint being there, there are small little details that have these huge impacts and really show where dollars are going, where communities are being invested in, and which communities are valued and how they're valued. And so I think that when we look at how banks come into the equation, we think about mortgages and small business loans. But I also think, and Andrea, you said this, or maybe you alluded to this, but really that it's time for, alternatives in the way in which we envision things. So maybe it's not work that the coalition has done to get no fee checking accounts, or to, lower the limits for the underwriting criteria for certain banks, so making it easier to get into loans for low to moderate income individuals. Maybe we need something that some folks will look at as radical, that banks really need to have, community benefits agreements, particularly here in Buffalo, that's just our culture. And, that there's a transparency and there's an accountability, that residents are able to provide input, that there's a consistent level of public input and feedback, and that's kind of a constant cycle. But I also think that we should think bigger than that. And this was actually in the New York Times recently by Angela Glover Blackwell. It was a great article, but talked about what is banks' responsibility in this moment in time? And it really kind of talks about reparations, but reparations in a way that is tangible, and I think that makes sense for people. So really talking about canceling debt for Black folks, eliminating those bank fees. So great, we have been able to introduce here in Buffalo, the coalition has been able to work with a few of the banks to get rid of fees on checking accounts, so that people don't have to worry about what happens, or having enough money to be able to start that relationship with a bank. But what if we did? What if we canceled Black debt? What if we eliminated those fees? What if we also had interest-free mortgages for Black homeowners? I think that that's something that would be fantastic and amazing, because I think about the majority of loans that Black folks and low-income communities go into. They're FHA loans. They're backed by the government, so they're seen as really secure and safe by the banks. Banks want to get folks into FHA loans. But over the life of a loan, an FHA loan may be great because up front, it allows for you to have about a 3% down payment. There can be closing cost assistance programs that folks can get into to combine with that. But over the life of the loan, you pay more, actually, because your interest rate, not your interest rate, but you have insurance on the life of that loan. And there's some that don't have it, but with FHA loans, you have insurance, the mortgage insurance for the life of the loan. So really thinking about ways in which banks can operate, and this is the funny part, but not as for-profit entities, which they are, but really as stewards of the neighborhoods in which they exist, and stewards of the money that folks deposit into their banks for them to operate, and for the folks that do that to live and to meet their needs day in and day out. I could keep going.
Well, we'll ask you to leave it there for now, Catherine, but we do want to encourage everyone who's tuning in here, if as you can realize that there is a lot to unpack here. This is complicated stuff. To get to the solution, how can people get in touch and get involved?
Encourage folks to go ahead and visit our website. It is bncrc.org, and you can send us an email through there and learn more about this, because you're right, it is quite complex. There's a lot to unpack. So you can learn about the CRA, you can learn about the work that we've done, and what's happening with banks locally right there in one place.
Thank you.
And that's the Buffalo Niagara Community Reinvestment Coalition, BNCRC.org?
.org, yep, .org.
Awesome. Catherine Franco, thanks so much for coming on to the Redline right here and shedding some of that light on how we find the solutions, how the solutions are being made here in Buffalo, this work that's ongoing. We appreciate your presence. Keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
And I think, Catherine's points deeply connect to what can be my last word for you, Seamus, I'm sure, which is, you know, these are complex issues, as Seamus just said, and ourselves at Partnership for the Public Good, many of our partners, we come together and set an agenda for change each year, which we can talk about another time, but you can find on our website the community agenda. It's a democratic process to pick the 10 ways that Buffalo Niagara should change through policy in the next year. But Catherine's point there is really that a whole lot of us, community residents, a whole sector, have spent years winning what are important but very incremental changes. And in this moment of crisis, new ideas can come in. Bigger picture ideas that folks have been asking for a long time can come in. And so I think we're all really in a moment of saying, understanding, as we've said during this ride, that redlining and the history of our city was one of choice and public policy design. How can we really transform that? Not just reform it incrementally, but get to a place of transformation with the choices that we're going to make this year in this very unique moment that we're in.
Right on. And so as I've asked all of our previous guests, how can folks get involved, get in touch with you and the Partnership for the Public Good? Absolutely. So you can find our website at ppgbuffalo.org, and we're also on Facebook and all the other social media things as well. And yeah, feel free to reach out. You can email right through the website, or all the staff are listed with email addresses as well. And as Seamus knows, we have a free partnership. You can join and then come on our radio show, participate in our policy process, submit research requests and submit intern requests and all these other benefits for partners. So if anyone is part of a formal or informal community group or nonprofit, you can explore partnership on our website as well, ppgbuffalo.org. It really is a beautiful process that that you all lay out of educating and then informing ways to get involved in things. You mentioned that the community agenda is a democratic process of how that comes to be. That is a really wonderful process. PPG, for anyone who's watching this, and hopefully we've inspired some action here, people who want to become more engaged in these issues. PPG makes it easy to get educated and get engaged in all this. So thank you so much, Andrew. This is, we said from the start, this is a really complicated issue. It's something that is relevant when we're riding around the city, and conversations are being had throughout the ride of how did we get here? So we wanted to look back, and we knew that the Redline ride would be a concept that would be hard to really wrap the traditional slow roll around, to really communicate this deeply with everyone who's participating. We know we have a smaller, much smaller contingent participating right now, but we had hoped that we could start it off on a Monday, and then work with some organizations to make this an ongoing series, and maybe some smaller rides where people could really kind of talk about this a little more while riding and learn a little bit in a smaller group. We have no choice right now than to have smaller groups. So this is something that we'll work on going forward, and we look forward to working with you continually on this. Well, same here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you so much. Andrea Sullivan, the Director of the Partnership for the Public Good. Keep up the great work. Keep in touch. Thank you. You too. So we'll close out the little ride here. Go back to the ride here just for a second here, Mark, because there's about a block or two left. And I want to give a shout out to the squad who got out ahead of me on this particular ride. And so some music, we have some fellowship, we have some food and drinks, and we did that here when we rode as a squad. So I'm continuing down Main Street past the headquarters of the Partnership for the Public Good, which again is at 617 Main. And a little hard to see. I must have tilted my helmet up somehow, so I apologize for how poorly that looks, but this is the waning seconds of it anyway. Why don't we pull that banner down so you can see it a little better, Mark? If we pull that banner down, that's the electric tower to the left, and this is what's called Roosevelt Square, Roosevelt Plaza. So a squad pulled in there. There's the squad hanging out after the ride, having around from the Fatty Beer Company there. And we saw there's a new place opening up in Genesee at the corner. Saw Tim Stevens working on it. I was also the owner of Ballyhoo and Lucky Day. And so it's this point of the ride. Thanks, squad. We had a great squad turnout for that, for this pre-recorded portion yesterday. And we got to talking about what we can do going forward. And we have more to work on before we can announce anything, but it's coming in the coming weeks. We're going to work on it. We've been continuing to talk with the Department of Erie County Department of Health. And what we want to do in the meantime is just make these more interactive. So please stay tuned. And we will be announcing for the upcoming virtual slow rolls some ways to make them more interactive, and for you all who have been tuning in or not, we'll pass the word around on how we can get more folks involved in making their own routes and getting more engaged with the theme of that particular week. So we thank again you all for tuning in the present, and in the future, anybody watching this, there will be more ways coming real soon to get involved. We appreciate Independent Health, our presenting partner since 2015, for helping us keep the wheels rolling, especially now. We encourage everyone, if they're so inclined, we do have a Venmo link there, or you can go to slowrollbuffalo.org, and there's a donate tab if you want to help us with how we are going to reinvent, continue to reimagine Slow Roll as we go forward. For now, as we thank Mark Odian with WNY Media, Buffalo.fm for producing this live stream, we will transition to the live music, the music portion, the after party of Slow Roll. And we're going to dig back just a couple days to one of our friends who's performed at Slow Roll after parties, and also in person, as well as over the last couple months as we do this as a live stream performing from home, is David Michael Miller. He got his band together over the weekend, set up a home studio, and live streamed a set with his band Miller and the Other Sinners. Not only did it just happen a couple days ago, but when we talk about the way forward, one thing that we've always worked on with Slow Roll is how can we, in whatever, small ways and large, you heard some really complicated ways in it, how can we overcome this disinvestment, this segregation that exists in Buffalo? And we have a free and inclusive community bike ride to encourage people to ride together and have these conversations. David Michael Miller is overcoming segregation in his way with his band, Miller and the Other Sinners. It's just an amazing collection of people from all around Western New York, and they tour all around the nation. And of course, they're unable to do that at the moment, but I encourage everybody to look up Miller and the Other Sinners, because they are getting back to live performances. And I think they have 3 in the coming week. Maybe one of those at least is David Michael Miller solo. So look up David Michael Miller, Miller and the Other Sinners. For now, let's enjoy a live stream set from this past Saturday, Miller and the Other Sinners. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in. We're going to keep going for another hour or so.
A little bit. And this is, yep. We'll bump the mix up just a little bit. Yeah, if you want. Matt, you can just hit that mast. Actually, that's the monitor. Do you see a little round knob near headphones? Go over to the right, and it says monitor. Just tweak that up a little bit. All right, we're going to, yes, home mix. Okay, we're going to bump it up a little bit. Audio's quiet. All right, we're going to try to get it rocking just a little bit more. Thanks for letting us, invade your home. You are in the Center Studio. In the hotbed of the music industry, which is Clarence, New York. And this evening, we got a man doing double duty over here, actually triple duty, Mr. Steve Davis on keys, bass, and a little bit of vocal. We've got Mr. Isaiah Griffin back here on the drums. Makes us all feel younger. And then back, we have the red room back there, which is the horn room. They have to stay away from the general population. And if you know Jim Boehm, you know exactly what I'm talking about already. There's a picture of him next to the word sexual harassment in the dictionary. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. It's just a joke. But he did go on a cruise, so. So Jim Boehm, gotta love him. And Mr. Kevin Hall, who was also experimenting with the whole streaming stuff, and we're all trying to figure some of this out. We're trying to get this room set up to do this more consistently, so we really want your feedback, and we really would love to do more of these. So we just want to get better at it, and we're talking about maybe doing some virtual touring to some of the spots. If you're jumping in with us from someplace other than Western New York, we want to start working with venues in your area that we've visited in the past and see if we can maybe do some virtual touring so we can touch base with our friends and fans. And we appreciate that. So we're going to keep playing, and I'm probably going to be talking about the new CD that we got out called Rise as well a little bit, and this is actually a cut from Rise, and I think it's kind of appropriate in some ways between what we're dealing with right now and in this world. And so it's a tune called Back Into It.
Yeah, trouble can find you when you're only trying to hide. It comes to unwind you, hits you on your blind side. Remember, you're just flesh and blood. Streams can turn to floods. Sometimes you have to hesitate when you just want to fight. It's alright to take a breath and wait, and you just won't fly. Jump high to claim your rightful place. This ain't the time to resist. Throw your fears just back into it. Just back into it. I'm not saying stand down and let them abuse you, but you can hold your ground and be who you choose to. Remember, you're just flesh and blood. Streams can turn to floods. Push the line. Sometimes you have to hesitate when you just won't fight. It's more right to take a breath and wait, and you just won't fly. But jump high to claim your rightful place. This ain't the time to resist. Throw your fears just back into it. Just back into it. to hesitate when you just wanna fight. It's more right to take a breath and wait when you just wanna fly. But jump high to claim your rightful place. This ain't that time. No, this ain't that time. Oh, push to the line. Sometimes you have to hesitate when you just wanna fight. It's more right to take a breath and wait and you just wanna fly. Jump high to claim your rightful place. This ain't the time to resist and throw your fears. Oh, push to the line. Sometimes you have to hesitate and you just wanna fight. It's more right to take a breath and wait and you just wanna fly. Jump high to claim your rightful place. This ain't the time to resist and throw your fears. Just back into it. Just back into it. Just back into it. Just back into it.
All right. So how we doing, folks? Turn, kick, drum, mic down, or roll the low end off a bit. Hey, it's good feedback. That's from Mark Terranova. So Mark, he knows his stuff. And if you don't like that, if you didn't like that comment, that was Mark Terranova. Love you, buddy. Hey, Larry's on here. Brittany from Louisville. Dave Register, how's it going? Mark, yes, sir. All right, I'm going to make that adjustment just because Mark said so. Oh, and we need a little more light. Now you can just see how handsome a Jim Bohm really is.
Just what they were thinking, David, I'm sure.
All right, Mark, we made that adjustment. Natalie's on. Jana. Greg, hey man, how you doing? Hey Tim. Great bass player, Mr. Tim Sheldon. All right, we're gonna keep playing, keep making comments. We'll block you all. Little hand-me-downs. Let's do a little hand-me-downs. All right, this is from the first CD, Poison Sipped, which for those of you who have been waiting for vinyl, we have kind of a cool announcement. We're going to be doing vinyl in both the new record and in Poison Sipped. We just got the quote for the new record, and Poison Sipped we wanted to do a while ago, and the company that we were working with, it just didn't work out. And so we were kind of finding something else, and we're going to try to do the packaging as close to as we can to the record, because we really wanted to do that. And Mr. Nick Peterson, who did the graphics on that, just really appreciate his work. He also did the work on the new Rise record. And I should mention that we have Mr. Matthew Miller behind the camera and making it happen. I'm sure he's drinking cold water right now that looks an awful lot like a beer.
to lose another son. Oh, man, swear to heaven now, nothing to a brother done. Hey, boy, winter in the schoolyard. The coldest brother's gone. Whoa, hand me down. Whoa, hand me down. Oh, she promised to the graveyard not to lose another son. Oh, man, swear to heaven not to run trouble come. Oh, winter in the schoolyard. You stare down another gun. Whoa, hand
to mention this, but I was going to dedicate this song to my friend who's no longer with us, Mr. Derek Campbell, because there's a story behind this tune. This is a song that I had, and some of you may remember a version of it actually in the Dive House Union days. It goes back to Beautiful Bones, actually. The song's been around for a minute. And when we did the album, Poison Sipped, Derek wanted to get on some tracks, but the tracks that we had planned, Chuck kind of gobbled them up and did the solos on them, and he was a little disappointed. He wanted to be on the record, so I thought, well, you know, there's actually a couple songs. One that we hadn't recorded, and that was this one that I could just hear his playing on. And the other one was Carolina Bound, which we didn't really have a solo for yet, and I thought, boy, he'd be really sweet on that. So we went in the studio, and he tracked those two tunes. He absolutely crushed this song. And to get to work with him in the studio and see Derek Campbell do his thing, we cranked up a couple amps. Brian Moore was doing that session, and I just remember how magical it was. And that was one of the first times where he and I actually had an extended period of time to just sit and hang out, and got to know him a little bit, and came to call him friend. And the world is definitely not as beautiful a place with him not in it. But I'm so glad that he's at rest. And so, you know, if you've got a beer in front of you, or any sort of beverage, doesn't have to be beer. If you have any sort of beverage in front of you, would you raise it up? I got some water. And just want to say thank you, Derek, for being who you are. Thank you for your person and your music, and certainly your friendship for me. But cheers to Mr. Derek Campbell. We did that. It's warm in the Center's studio, which would make sense, right? But that's also because we got an old house and it doesn't have AC. The fan's going. We're just trying to make it work. Oh man, there's a great guitar player. Gary from Rochester, man. That dude is disgusting. Thanks for jumping on. Appreciate it. Deb's on here. Ann, hey Ann. Hey Dave. Boy, so many. Chris Meal. How's it going, buddy? Miss Linda Appleby. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. In my opinion, just an amazing icon in Western New York, a person who walks what she talks, and appreciate how she has been not only an educator but an activist, and pretty amazing. Sam Whitman from Maine. This kid is fantastic. We hope to get him back down in this area doing some music. He's something pretty awesome. Brutch Woods, sounds great on your home system. We like those kind of comments. Appreciate it. Thanks, I'm glad it does. Don Petrino's on. Man, so many. Oh my goodness, look at all y'all. Don't you got something to do? Seriously. No, we appreciate it. So we were supposed to be playing Bell Star concert tonight in Colden, and obviously, you know, with just the way things are happening right now, we couldn't do that show, and so we thought we'd kind of make an effort at this live stream, and so we appreciate, you know, you being a part of that. I appreciate these guys being a part of that, and Matt, man, making it look good. We need some of those handsome filters. Do you have any of the handsome filters on that camera? Because I could use it. I mean, obviously not this guy, because look at him. Did you just shake your head like you? He did a Maybelline commercial right in the middle of our gig. All right, we lost another great icon, Mr. Bill Withers, and I did this song years ago because, and listen, for those of you out there who know Mike DeSanto and especially his story and the struggles that he's had, I owe Mike a debt of gratitude. That's how that was going to come out. Debt of gratitude. I cannot repay, because he turned me on to the deep Bill Withers cuts. You know, I knew Bill Withers, and I had listened to all the stuff that we all kind of heard on the radio, and he introduced me to the other great stuff on the records as well, and got me to do a deep dive. And to this day, as some of you have heard me say a million times, live at Carnegie Hall, I listen to it every so often just to center myself, because there's something about that concert and him and that crowd and the recording that was just magic for me. So I wrote this song just to try to say thank you to him, and we're going to do it for you, and we're going to do some jamming on it, because that's a big part of this song. So a little digging on Bill for you. Taking it all in, checking it all out, and boozing, yes, I know it always will. Keep my bodies around, send the spirit to chill. So get to digging
on. Yeah. Digging on, digging on. Yeah. I said dig it now, dig it. Grandma's hands clapped in church on Sunday morning. Grandma's hands, she played that tambourine. Yeah, she played that tambourine so well. She played it well. It's a lovely day now, lovely day, it's a lovely day.
not sure what's happening right now. Is there a history of ghosts in your house? It's That's so weird. Hey, look, Brewster, you're not in the band. You've asked so many times. I don't know if you can see our dog going through. Brewster, come on now. All right, so we're going to try to jump back into this jam. Have no idea what just happened, and the fact that I knew Steve was good, but the fact that he can actually play without actually touching the keys is freaking amazing. We are not recording, so I know. So I have no idea what just happened. But Jim, just give us the last little bit, would you? 2, 3. Try to get in your band. That was Brewster, the Chocolate Lab. Mr. Isaiah Griffin on the drums. We're gonna have to figure out that the keyboards are doing something weird. You wanna try it? No. It's like randomly sustaining and playing odd notes. So we're gonna skip over to Mr. Kevin Hall. Just gonna take us back. Sweating in the Sinner's Studio. Maybe that's what we should call this series, at least until the fall. Sweating in the Sinner's Studio. All right, let's see who's on. All right, Ron's on. Hey, man. Bill Meyer from Illinois. How you doing, man? Hope you dig the record. Glad you got it. We had kind of a weird thing with sending out the records. We had... That's a long story. I'm not going to bore you all with. I'll do a solo show and bore you with that story. But we're glad you're getting them because we were thinking some of them were going to get sent back, postage due. Whoop. Okay. We're still here. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Making some adjustments. Let's see who else we got on here. We got Judah. Judah Seeley's on here. Dude, folks, go over to Judah's page, and I need to just say that he's, I think, one of the most talented musicians I've ever run across. Got a chance to do some shows with him out in Rochester, and well, we all did, and it was just fantastic. I did a couple duo shows with him too, and he's just an awesome human being, and he's got some great music out there. So he's got a new release, and Kevin's got a tune or more out there. I don't even, how many you got running right now? Another one on the way. So please get out and support these incredible musicians that we're so lucky to get to play some music with from time to time. Butch is on here. Hey man, how's it going? Tim, and another Tim. A lot of Tims. And yep, Bill and Judy from Chicago. Happy belated to you, Judy. Appreciate y'all. All right, let's see what we got. All right, we're gonna slow it down. So if you got a significant other, you can grab them and head towards the open space in your home. And this is a song about Memphis. And it's a song that is dear to me because Memphis was a lot of learning for me. And some of you already know these stories and have heard them a million times. And for the 2 people on here that haven't, I'll tell you again. But I was down there with Dive House Union for the International Blues Challenge and stepped foot into Stax Museum. And I certainly had a connection with Memphis. You know, there's some places that you feel drawn to. I certainly felt drawn to Memphis. And I remember going through Stax, and I've been through probably 4 times now. And you know, I guess if you're going to look at a city and have a study on what we're talking about when we say Black Lives Matter, when we say that there's you know, uneven ground, that there's certainly been a way of handling folks in our society that is different from handling other folks in our society. When you want to talk about that, I think you need to look at Memphis, and you can learn a lot from Memphis. I certainly did. I didn't understand things like we had a time in our history, and this is very mild, honestly, and I feel stupid for not knowing this in a way, because it seems in certain ways very minor compared to some of the other injustices. But there used to be white and black ambulances. Now, if you're just trying to make sense out of that one, you can't, because there's no reasonable explanation for that. Going through that museum, I came out of there thinking 2 things. One is I owe, you know, so much to the music that's come before me. Everything that I base my music around comes really straight from the fields. It comes from slave labor. It comes from the inner groanings of the heart when everything's been torn away from you. That music is really why I make music. So I owe everything to those great musicians that were able to capture that and make it available to my ear. And I came away from that also thinking, what could this white dude ever add? Like, I'm going to play a couple notes and I'm taking away from what's been done before. And it took me a little bit to get over that, only from the standpoint that I thought, well, if I can just keep pointing back to it, you know. If you never buy any of my music, that's cool. Go buy Sam Cooke. Just go buy some Sam Cooke records and life is going to be better for you. I guarantee it. Let his voice and his message resonate with you. Don't buy music from me. Go buy from the staple singers. Go pick up some, you know, especially the older B.B. King, which I just absolutely love. Go buy this music that's been, and for that matter, support artists that actually acknowledge and pay tribute to why guys like me can even do this. And the ones that don't buy their music. And don't go to their shows and don't support it, because it's ridiculous. So anyway, this song to me is a song that talks about that, and certainly my love for Memphis, and we're going to insert a little Sam Cooke into this as well. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to make sure that the microphone is up for Steve on this as well, because I love it when he sings it. He sings it in a way that I never can, and I love hearing it. So this is a tune called Memphis Belle.
asking when I drove that trailer into town. Down on Bill, you say your history to me. And it took my breath just like a southern winter storm. Siren drum. Whoa, Memphis Belle. Oh, Memphis Belle. Memphis Belle. Oh, you're so like heaven, child, but you hurt just like hell. Show me your soul, say your mind as well. Oh, my long, long, long Memphis Belle. Now you have to hustle. You have to hustle just to pay them bills. And play your games by the neon lights. Let the four-way meet. Ooh, the patrons seem to feel your heart. Your heart's still so good. So call me, come on, call me through the smoking gin. And let me stand. Oh, where all your lovers share the mind. Like a siren draw me in. Let your blues begin to move me, move me. Move me like it's yours. Whoa, Memphis Belle. Yeah, Memphis Belle. Memphis Belle. Oh, you soothe like heaven, child, but you hurt just like hell. Come show me your soul. Save mine as well. Oh, my long, long, long Memphis. know what's up there, yeah. Way beyond the sky. But it's been a long time coming. But I know a change is gonna come. Yes, a change is gonna come. Yes, a change is gonna come. Mr. Steve. Memphis band. Yeah, Memphis band. Memphis band. Roaring soon like heaven child, but you hurt just like hell. Come show me your soul. Save mine as well. Save mine has well. Oh my long, long, long. Hey, Matt, could you do me a favor? Oh, we do have a tip jar, but of course we did not put that information up because I was knee-deep in other technical issues. But if you, we'll post in here when we're done so that you can throw some tips that way. Would be awesome. That's right. Can you do me a favor, Matt, and can you... there's a box of CDs somewhere. There's a box of CDs somewhere, and can you just bring me a Rise CD? Yeah, might be in the front. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but yes, we will get that. We will get that tip jar going, and Tim Hare, missing you from Colden, man. Tim, we wish we could have been out there doing it. So we appreciate you helping us get the word out about this, but yeah. All right, we're going to do, we'll probably do, let's see, a couple more for you here tonight. Let's do a little, think we can do Waiting for the Bus? Jam it. All right, this is a tune that's off of the new Rise CD. It's a cover. ZZ Top, it's a tune that I've been doing for years because I just love it. We finally got a chance to record it. So this is the new CD. It's called Rise, and we're going to actually end with that after we get done with Waiting for the Bus. But real proud of this EP, and had some amazing players on this album. A bunch of different wonderful people contributed to it, and this is just got sent out to over 250 radio stations, and we hit a digital release with them as well another week before that with a bunch. So I think it's out to like 400 some odd stations all across the United States and Canada, and a couple of dotted across the world.
Mr. Brad Hunt is working this record to get us some airplay and some hopefully some new fans. And so we also appreciate, because we know that a lot of our fans find us through folks like you that are watching, that pass our music along. We just dropped off 12 CDs to one fan in Fairport who's going to be giving them out, and know another one who actually bought 13 up in Lockport, and they're passing them out. And so we appreciate that really so much, because there's nothing, it's kind of like, you find that great restaurant, how do you find it? And odds are you weren't just reading reviews. Probably you had a good friend who turned you on to it, and that's how a lot of the grassroots stuff works. And so we appreciate, getting the word out on this. We just got the graphics back for the vinyl, which looks really, really, really cool. And so we're going to be putting that out, placing that order this week. So anyway, get you some, and get you some to hand out, or at least share some of our stuff with your friends so they can find Miller and the Other Sinners. Appreciate it. A little bit.
Oh, that's a wrap for Miller and the Other Sinners' live stream. That's a live stream from this past Saturday. Thanks, Dave, for permission to share it, and Mark for bringing it back up there. The reason we're cutting it here is because right at that moment, the Jim Boehm and Kevin Hall, the horn players, walked away. I don't know, they thought they had a song off, but they didn't. And so Miller and the guys kick into the song, and the horn part comes in, and he turns around and is wondering where they were. So we'll leave that song out. But follow Miller and the Other Sinners on Facebook, davidmillermusic.com. I got my copy of that new album, Rise. Such good original music, and really carefully curated covers, the likes of Bill Withers and Sam Cooke. Just what a great band, and what a great message and music. We're so grateful to have them in our backyard here in Western New York. And check them out, because they have some live performances coming up. I think 3 this week as we ease back. Here with Slow Roll, we are easing all right. We had a nice conversation with some folks at the Department of Health, Erie County, last week, talking a lot now amongst our squad on some things we can do to get you all more involved. This Monday night virtual Slow Roll is fun. We make it meaningful, but we know it's not enough. So please keep in touch. Share your ideas with us if you have any. It's slowrollbuffalo@gmail.com. Ways that you'd like to get involved with us. Go to our website, slowrollbuffalo.org. And once again, just going back to that message of solidarity that we've been sharing since the start of these virtual rides, and really going back to March when we started with our response to the current pandemic, is that we got to lean on each other here. So if there's anything you need that you think that Slow Roll can help with, please let us know. We got a big squad, people who love to do things for and with the community. If there's anything that you want to do, want to get involved with, and you look to us, if you want to look to us to help make something happen, we would love to hear from you. So please, again, slowrollbuffalo@gmail.com, slowrollbuffalo.org. Please keep in touch. We'll do this again next Monday here on the interwebs, and we were going to make it more interactive with some ways for y'all to share your own routes, and we'll bring them into the virtual Slow Roll. We have a lot of good stuff cooking. So once again, with thanks to our presenting partner, Independent Health, been with us since 2015, especially now helping keep the wheels rolling. Thanks to all of you tuning in the present and the future. Big love to our squad. We had a nice group of 10 or 12 riding yesterday with all of our faces covered so we can ride together. And again, thanks to Mark Odie and our producer, WNY Media at buffalo.fm. We're really so grateful to be able to gather still in any sort of way. And we hold space for everyone who's suffering now, as we know, even though it's not as bad right now in Western New York as it was a few months ago. Still folks suffering in so many ways from this, and it's getting worse in other places. And so we send love and light to everyone and hope that you all keep in touch. We'll see you again here next Monday. Peace.